Alison Levine has survived sub-zero temperatures, hurricane-force winds, sudden avalanches, and, are you ready for this? Probably the hardest thing of all, a career on Wall Street. Her new book, On the Edge, The Art of High-Impact Leadership, went on sale last week, and it's already on the New York bestsellers list. Wow. Alison, welcome to the show.
Oh, my gosh. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I love your energy already. I can't stand it. This is great. I wish I could have you here in person because I love what you're about and I love this book that you've written and I think it's so needed and I want to know what makes you tick. Well, were you a different child? I mean, when did your parents recognize this when you were little? Were you jumping or climbing up, bunk beds and doing all kinds of crazy stuff?
You know what? It's funny. I actually did not start climbing until my early 30s because I was born with a hole in my heart that got bigger as I got older. So I had 2 heart surgeries by the time I turned 30 and didn't start climbing until I was 32.
Wow. Well, that's pretty amazing. Now, when you were born with these holes in your heart, did they tell you that would hinder you in any, thing you were doing normally as a child?
Well, the funny thing is, I actually wasn't diagnosed until I was 17. So I grew up in a very tough love family where, my family was close. I have awesome parents, but my mom always had this rule: no whining, no crying, no complaining. So as a child, when I would say, oh, I kind of have chest pains, I don't know, I can't really breathe, my mom would say, oh, you're just nervous for the spelling bee.
Oh, my gosh.
Just nervous for your student council speech. And that's why I didn't get diagnosed until I was 17 when I finally lost consciousness and had to be rushed to the emergency room.
Oh, your poor parents, when they heard this, must have gone back in their minds and thought of all the times that they didn't feel sorry for you.
Yeah, it was awesome. I got to lay a huge guilt trip on them.
Oh, my gosh. Well, let's start with why leadership is everyone's responsibility, regardless of title, tenure, or experience level. Tell me more why everyone should be really pulling their weight. I mean, I think this is interesting.
Yeah, I think leadership is such an interesting subject. And the overarching theme of On the Edge, the book that I just wrote, is about how we're all responsible for looking out for one another. And what I realized by going on these expeditions to these high mountains, whether it's Mount Everest, a Mount McKinley in Alaska, or a North Pole or South Pole expedition, if something happens to the designated leader, the rest of the team needs to be able to step up to the plate and carry on with the mission, right? You're in the middle of Antarctica and something happens to the leader. It could be days, weeks, or even longer before any type of rescue can take place. So the rest of the team needs to be able to step up to the plate. And if you leave everything, the leadership responsibility, to one person, when that person's around, then there's when that person's not around, then there's complete chaos. So we all need to realize that regardless of title or tenure or where we work or what we do, it's everyone's responsibility to be looking out for the people around them.
Well, how do you propose as mothers that we help instill this at a very young age?
Well, it's interesting because I think that raising kind, compassionate children who will contribute to their community is the most important job in the world. And you don't have to have your own kids to make that happen, right? I don't have kids,
right?
I have children, and I have friends' children, and we're all responsible for being serving as a positive role model and for realizing that we have influence on these children as they grow up. And as mothers, every mother is a leader, right?
Absolutely.
Talk about queens of having to juggle a million things and be responsible for, kids and what goes on in the house, what goes on outside the house, working moms, stay-at-home moms. Everybody's just going a mile a minute trying to juggle all of these things. And a lot of it has to do with realizing that your kids watch you, they learn from you, they will mimic you, and you can't assume that they're just going to learn how to be great people on their own. You have to realize that it's really important to talk to them, to keep the communication lines open, to explain to them the proper way to treat people.
Well, I totally agree with you. And it's interesting because these kids that are growing up today, I guess they're calling them the millennials, I guess. It's a different way of thinking. When my son was young, he's now 33, but when he was 7, I taught him how to do his own laundry, and I made him accountable for when the laundry got too much. He would go in, and if he wanted clean socks, that was a good way to start, Yeah,
you want to teach my 43-year-old younger to do that?
Well, I agree, though, because you teach your children by example. And if you don't start out giving them responsibility, then they're never going to rise up to responsibility.
Exactly. And I think that parents really do their children a disservice by babying them too much, because then when they turn into adults, they can't take care of themselves. And then how are they going to, contribute to a partnership and a relationship later in life? I mean, especially like women are attracted to men who are self-sufficient and who are independent and can take care of them. And I don't mean financially, I just mean emotionally, and be partners in the relationship and not rely on the woman to do everything for them. I mean, to me, there's nothing less attractive than a helpless man.
Oh, I know. I totally agree with you there. Well, if you're just joining me, I am visiting with Alison Levine, and her new book, On the Edge, The Art of High Impact Leadership, is out, and you need to get it. It's on the New York Times bestseller list. Okay, so Alison, you say businesses should want to reward the risk takers and not so much the employees with flawless track records. Now, this makes sense because you will not grow without some sort of risk involved, but can you talk about this?
Yeah, so it's so tempting to look at someone's performance. You look at someone's resume that has this great track record and they've been a stellar performer, and you think, okay, this is the person that needs to be promoted. This is the person that needs to be recognized. This is the person that needs to be rewarded. But oftentimes, it's the people with these perfect-looking track records who have never really pushed themselves and gotten out of their comfort zones and taken on big risks. And it's the people who have taken their hits along the way and who have stumbled and who have fallen and who have gotten their teeth kicked in, who are often the people who are taking on the most risk and therefore pave the way for other people. And a great example of this is most people know the name Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay, the first guys to summit Mount Everest, right? First guys to get to the top. People know their names. But there were dozens of climbers who tried before them and failed to reach the top. And nobody knows any of their names. But
Probably.
You're telling me that Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay didn't benefit from the 411 from all of those other climbers? I mean, those climbers absolutely paved the way for future climbers' success. And we need to keep that in mind and not just look at these people that look like they've achieved success and view them as role models. We need to take a strong look at the people who are really pushing themselves, taking on the most risks, and who aren't afraid to stumble and fail along the way, because those are the people that teach us the best lessons.
I love that. Okay, now I know this one's going to make a lot of people go crazy, but I agree with you with this. Tell the listeners why you think it's better to have teammates with enormous egos.
This is actually some advice I got from Coach K, Mike Krzyzewski. If you're not a college basketball fan, you may not know him. He's the head coach of the men's basketball team at Duke University, and he's also the coach of the U.S. men's Olympic basketball team.
Wow.
So he's a gold medal winning coach, and he gave me some great advice when he told me about how he chooses players for the Olympic team, because he can pull from the entire NBA. And he said, well, I want players with big egos. And he said I look out for big egos. And that's right, you don't want big egos. And he said, no, I do. I want big egos. And he explained to me, you want people who are good and who know that they're good. And he said, I don't want LeBron James to come out onto the court and not be LeBron James. And that made sense to me, because I thought, hell, I don't want to be stuck high up on Mount Everest, on the Hillary Step, which is a 40-foot pitch of rock and ice that's nearly vertical, one of the toughest parts of summit day on Mount Everest. I don't want to be stuck behind someone who's going really slow, thinking, gosh, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't be here, maybe this is too much for me. You want to be climbing with people who are thinking, yeah, I got this, no problem, I got this. And he said the other reason, the other type of ego he looks for is what he calls team ego. And he said you want people who are proud to be part of something that collectively is more important than any of the individuals. And I thought, yep, that's who I want on my team.
Wow. That's very impressive. And a lot of people would argue that because they think ego is just about, being all self-centered,
Right. Because you don't have to be, excuse my language, an a-hole to have a
right.
Ego. And it doesn't mean you treat people poorly. It just means, you're good and you know that you're good. And for some reason we have, we tend to think that ego is a bad thing. And society has kind of evolved that way, and where we think, oh, ego, that's bad. That's bad. Those are people that are arrogant, that treat people poorly, that think too highly of themselves. But having a strong ego just means you're good, and there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that.
I agree. Well, if you're just joining me, I am visiting with Alison Levine, who's got a new book called On the Edge, The Art of High Impact Leadership. All right, well, we hear the expression toxic leadership a lot of time now in the news, so you can shed some light on this, I'm sure.
I feel like that's been in the news so much lately with politicians especially, and I kind of feel like it's been ongoing news.
Mm-hmm.
If there isn't a story about a toxic political leader this week, then there will be one next week, so just hold on. Part of what creates toxic leadership is leaders putting themselves and their own interests before the interests of their people, of their teammates, of their constituents. Leaders need to realize that they should never ask something of their team that they wouldn't be willing to do themselves. And it's interesting because I'm on the part-time faculty at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, and I write a little bit about this in my book, On the Edge, that people in the business world and in government and in our communities, those leaders need to apply the leaders eat last rule, which is what the military uses. And basically in the military, the lowest ranking soldiers eat first, right? The enlisted soldiers get their meals first, followed by the non-commissioned officers, followed by the commissioned officers, and it's only when all their people have been fed that the commanding officers get to eat. They always take care of their people before they take care of themselves. And I think if government leaders and business leaders operated that way, then our country would be a lot better off and our businesses would be a lot better off.
Wow. I think that's a very good point. But I'm still stuck on the fact that you are teaching at West Point. What is that like?
Oh, I love it. It is my favorite part of what I do. I do a lot of keynote speaking around the country, and when I get to go lecture at West Point, it's my absolute favorite thing. The cadets at West Point are such a special breed because these are students that could have gone to school anywhere. They could have gone to Harvard or Princeton or Stanford or wherever they wanted to go. But instead, they chose to go to West Point, which is an incredibly rigorous academic experience. But on top of academics, they have to worry about physical fitness, military leadership, and then instead of going to get some fancy job when they graduate, they are going to serve our country. Mm-hmm. And I think it takes a special person to have that mindset and have that in their heart, that feel like they were put on this earth to serve our country. And it's such an honorable calling. And so when I'm at West Point, I feel like I learn as much from the cadets as they learn from me. I teach in the Department of Behavioral Sciences and Leadership, and I lecture in a military leadership class on how to lead teams in extreme environments.
Wow. Well, that must have been, I can imagine when you walked into class for the first time and they saw this attractive woman, walking in to teach them this. I mean, there had to be some looks on their faces. Or are they so good that they just sat there at attention, so to speak?
Well, you know what's interesting? About 10 to 15% of the Corps of Cadets is women now. And
really?
the first graduating class from West Point, the first female graduates were the class of 1980. So women haven't been going there for that long, but the school was around obviously for a long time when it was an all-male school, but now 10 to 15% of the class are women, and so they're really a lot more accustomed to having women around now.
Well, that's good. That's nice to hear. We're all pro-woman here, but we love men too. So.
Actually, the first captain at West Point, the top cadet in the school is a woman right now. So every year there's a new person that's chosen as the top cadet, and they're the first captain, and right now it's a woman.
That is awesome. Well, if you're just joining me, we are visiting with Alison Levine with a new book out, The Art of High Impact. It's called On the Edge, and it's the art of high impact leadership, to be specific. It is a fabulous book, and it's so needed. And I love that you take your experiences and all the intensity that you've been through, some of the world's most dangerous places. And I want you to maybe share with some of my listeners some of your most intense moments and how you think that really shaped you.
Well, after spending about 15 years in the mountains, and I've been to some of the most dangerous places on the planet. I've been to Mount Everest twice. I served as the team captain of the first American women's Mount Everest expedition in 2002. I've climbed the highest peak on all 7 continents, known as the 7 Summits, and I've skied to both the North and the South Pole. And when you're in these remote extreme environments where there is so much risk and lives are on the line, it's not only incredibly physically challenging, but it's psychologically very, very challenging as well. And what I found is that when I had doubt on these expeditions, I had to find that voice that said, You're cold, you're hungry, you're tired, you don't think you can take one more step, but you can. You can take one more step. And I had that voice telling me I could take one more step. So I would take the one more step. And then I found I could take a step after that and one more after that. And each time I got closer to the summit. So what I learned from these expeditions is that you have to find that voice in your head. You cannot rely on other people to be that voice for you. And when I got back from the expeditions, I realized that the lessons I learned being in these remote extreme environments and pushing myself through the point of, past the point of pain and discomfort, those lessons really helped me in my day-to-day life, whether it was challenges in my business career, challenges in community events I was involved in, challenges in my social life. All those lessons from those extreme environments really played out back when I was at sea level too, and that's why I wanted to write On the Edge, because I knew that the lessons from these mountains and these North and South Pole expeditions could help people climb the figurative mountains that they deal with in everyday life.
Well, I just got to say thank you for climbing those mountains so that I don't have to. I mean, I just can imagine. I mean, I would be up there thinking, and why am I doing this again? So thank you for, going out there and doing that for us so that we can just read your book and be totally encouraged. And now I'm not tired any longer. And everyone who's sitting on the couch and can't get up and do what they need to do, get up off your butt. There's no excuses. Oh, my gosh. Well, Alison Levine, you have been a total delight. This book is fabulous. If you haven't read it, go out and get it. On the Edge, The Art of High Impact Leadership. I think the kids should read this. I think you should read this to your kids, and I think you should apply this. So, Alison, thank you so much, and I hope you'll come back.
Oh, I would love to come back anytime. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you.
All right, take care.